Hi everyone, and welcome to this introductory video about intertextuality. So what are we going to cover? Essentially, we're going to cover the three different types of intertextuality, and what it is a bit of an overarching concept. And the success criteria here is for you to be able to identify and differentiate, so distinguish between the three different types of intertextuality. So let's get started. Now, what is intertextuality as a definition? So SACE defines it as the shaping of a text meaning by the reader of other texts or the interrelationship of texts. So it's a little bit wordy and we're going to unpack that today. And I've also got the definition of the pretext inter down the bottom here. So that either means between or among or together. Okay, so let's unpack this in a bit more detail. I like to think of intertextuality as a bit like Inception. So if you haven't seen the film, I've got some images on the left here. The idea behind it was that there is a dream within a dream, and the actors in this film, or the characters, they infiltrate the different levels of these dreams to change the subconscious of that character in some way. So I like to apply that concept to intertextuality in terms of it being a text within a text in some form or way. If you're not sure what a text is, essentially this is things like a play, a novel, short story, could be a news article, most of the things that you're going to study in English. Okay, so why do I need to know this? Not only is intertextuality covered from years 8 to 12 in school, but it's also everywhere around you, and the more you study it and really understand it, the more you'll see it everywhere. So what are the three different types? The first one is appropriation, the second is allusion, and the third is parody. And we're now going to go into those into a bit more detail. So number one, appropriation. This is where a text is adapted and made new. So you've got an original text of some form, could be a short story, it could be a film, it could be a novel, that is then adapted into a different form. And it's important to note here that it isn't just copied, they don't just get the same actors in and the same director and just say, go again. It's important to note that it's always reimagined in some way. They're trying to make it new, whether it's for a different context or for a different audience. So I've got an example here for you. This novel on the left here called Emma was written by Jane Austen and was then adapted into a film starring Gwyneth Paltrow called Emma. And this is a bit more of a true retelling of the original Emma story. And this was then adapted into the film Clueless. Now what they've done here is taken the general plot or the ideas and some of the characters and really brought that into a different context. They played with the plot a lot and have created quite an original story, and a lot of people don't realise that Clueless is actually based on Jane Austen's Emma. Alright, here's another one. Batman has been made into many, many different forms of text. So what began as a simple comic has been interpreted into a novel, for example, and was then interpreted into the Batman series, the first one being The Batman Begins. Okay, another one here. William Shakespeare was a playwright, and he is extremely famous and someone you'll study in English, and a lot of his plays have been adapted into different forms continuously throughout history. So an example of that is his play The Taming of the Shrew, which was adapted into the very popular film 10 Things I Hate About You. Now this film was then adapted into a TV show. It wasn't very popular, but I'm sure you can have a look at it on YouTube. Okay, Cinderella has been extremely popular in terms of being adapted, reinterpreted, or appropriated in history. So what began as the Brothers Grimm's fairy tale was very dark, it was very gruesome, was then adapted into the Disney Cinderella film. So it was animated and it was for children, made it into quite a love story. This has then been adapted into films like A Cinderella Story, Ella Enchanted, and Ever After, so starring, so it's not animated and starring actors. And then the latest two here, so we've got Happily Never After was another animated version, and then the 2015 version of Cinderella. Each of these has the same storyline, has the same characters, but has been reimagined in a slightly different way and in a slightly different context. Okay, so the second type of intertextuality is allusion. Now, it's important to note that it's not illusion with an I. That is that kind of optical illusion where you look at something and your mind plays tricks on you. This is where you allude to something. So it's reference to another text. So not only can it be a reference to a text, but it can also be a person, a place, or an event. Okay? And I guess it evokes that idea that we're all in this together. So that the reader and the author, you're all part of the same cultural experience. If you were in the same room, you would be referring to the same things, having a conversation about a topic that you all understood. Now, important note here is that it's up to the reader or the audience to make that connection between the texts. It's often never explained. And so if in a film someone refers to Shakespeare and the audience doesn't know who Shakespeare is, they kind of miss out on that connection. Okay, so what are some examples? Now there are 4 different types of allusion. The first is literary. So this is where you allude to either a text, a literary text, so a novel usually in its entirety, but it can also be a character or the author. The second type is cultural. So this is where something's happening in culture at the time, can be pop culture, could be music, anything that's relevant at the time where you allude to that. Okay, the third one is biblical. So this is where you refer to stories or characters again from the Bible. So obviously has a religious element. And the fourth is where you allude to events or characters or people, things that have happened in the past, so in history. Now what I've done here, I've got 4 images. I'd like you to correctly match each of these to the 4 different types of allusion. And if you'd like to read a little bit more about allusion, just head to this slide share link down the bottom. Okay, so I'm hoping that for literary you linked that to Taylor Swift's Love Story. Now this alludes to William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. The second, cultural, so that one goes down to here, which is a comic that kind of reenacts the 3 Little Pigs, except instead of the wolf trying to blow the house down, he's using the Angry Birds characters from the app. Number 3, biblical, goes to this one over here. So they're trying to compare Windows with Apple, and it's alluding to the Adam and Eve story from the Bible. And the very last one here, historical, they're trying to make a comment about President Obama's Obamacare, so from the United States, saying that it's a bit of a Trojan horse, and that if you don't know what that is, I definitely suggest that you Google it. Okay, so the last one here is parody. This is a funny interpretation, so a humorous interpretation of a serious piece of literature, writing, art, or music. So it really pokes fun at something, and it's really to entertain the reader or audience. Now, a lot of people confuse that with satire, and satire does the same kind of mocking, except it's always for a very serious reason. They're trying to educate their audience or bring about some kind of social or political change. So always remember, parody is always to entertain the audience. Okay, so The Simpsons is very, very good at parody, and they do it a lot. So I've got some images here of some examples of parody from The Simpsons. I would like you to pause the video here and see if you can figure out exactly what they're parodying. Okay, so top left here, they are parodying the film Frozen. Over here, they are parodying a very, very famous piece of artwork called The Persistence of Time. Down here, they're parodying the Beatles album cover. And over here is that very famous Ellen DeGeneres selfie that happened a few years ago. Okay, so a bit of a summary from today. Think of intertextuality as a bit like Inception. It's a text within a text. There are 3 types: appropriation, allusion, and parody. And your homework for this session is to find your own examples of all 3 of these types of intertextuality. All right, I hope you've learned a bit about intertextuality today, and I will see you in class. See you guys.